What happened to the mighty Mr. Biggs? A household name that once dominated the fast food scene, now a shadow of its former self. Many of us remember the bustling restaurants, the iconic colors, and the popular name. But today, Mr. Bigg's outlets stand as mere relics of a bygone era. Dilapidated, deserted, and forgotten. But how did it all go wrong? Our investigation into the rise and fall of this outstanding franchise uncovered lots of interesting stories that would blow your mind. So join us in this journey as we give you a detailed walkthrough about what happened to Nigeria's greatest of all time. The fast food brand we all know today didn't begin as fast food. Owned by the parent company, the United Africa Company of Nigeria, what we know as Mr. Bigg's today first started as inbuilt coffee shops in Kingsway department stores around the 1960s. This department store brand was owned by the UAC and was very popular at the time, given its unique and fancy approach to shopping. In 1973, these coffee shops were upgraded to a place where shoppers and surrounding residents could go refresh their taste buds when they craved the tasty pastries or the nice coffee the small joint was known for. And this upgrade rebranded these inbuilt joints as Kingsway Rendezvous. Even with its little beginning, the Kingsway Rendezvous saw a boom in sales and customers, and through intensive consumer research, the UAC's marketing team detected this hidden demand among Nigerian consumers for family dining, quick servings, and a taste for Western-style fast food. It was now decided that the Kingsway department store was getting a sister company, and that, which once existed as a chill-out section of the shopping center, became a full-blown company of its own. The Mr. Bigg's fast food chain. Established in 1986, Mr. Bigg's was the first of its kind in the country. There was no competition. The fast food chain had the popularity or the financial backing and a very prominent brand identity. It was as if the UAC had all the advantage at their fingertips. Most of all, being that the fast food chain was well received by the public. There is only one thing that businesses in such positions do: expand. The UAC board did not withhold companies' resources in replicating the fast food joint in populated areas around the country. And in just little over 20 years, the Mr. Bigg's brand could boast of 170 locations in 40 cities. The company was doing so well that it even expanded into Ghana, a neighboring country where the UAC established 4 locations. Despite being at the top of the game, with few competitors, the company didn't relent in maintaining excellent customer service and an affordable food menu that catered to various preferences. The branding department made sure that the fast food chain was themed in a family-friendly way, both through its name and bright brand colors and the internal settings. It is worth noting that Mr. Bigg's may have modeled itself after the popular American fast food giant, McDonald's, by replicating themselves everywhere within the country, choosing a name that rang a bell in the ears of little children and featured side attractions such as the Mr. Bigg's mascot, playgrounds, and special packages. To the naked eye, it appeared that the UAC was playing their cards right and the yield of their efforts was satisfactory.
Oh yeah.
However, this might bring one to ask the question, when did Mr. Bigg's play the wrong card? One should know that the question of Mr. Bigg's decline is not a matter of when they played the wrong cards, but a matter of how they played their cards entirely. You see, when Mr. Bigg's decided to expand, several expansion models were brought to the table, and most of them were evaluated by their effectiveness in reaching Mr. Bigg's expansion goals. The UAC board favored a more quicker expansion scheme that required less money and still reinforced the brand identity through a domino effect. There was only one option that could do that, and it was franchising. Let me explain. Franchising in business is a model where a company who is known as the franchisor, allows an individual or entity to operate a business using the franchisor's trademark, products, services, and business system in exchange for a fee and ongoing royalties. So, what Mr. Biggs did here was allow another individual or business entity open a restaurant in a designated location under the name of Mr. Biggs. The new business would account for the expenses of setting up the new outlet, and Mr. Biggs will allow them use their brand name for a fee and recurring payments as royalties. This appears to be a win-win situation, but was it so for Mr. Biggs? For a moment, it was, as all the USA had to do was milk the popularity of Mr. Biggs and assign them to buyers who were ready to build and manage an outlet. In turn, this would bring about the popularity of Mr. Biggs in that new area and boost the accessibility of the fast food chain. So, it was basically the more they expanded, the more popular they became, and the more popular they became, the greater the need for expansion grew. Many fast food giants in the world today relies on this method to reach their expansion and globalization goals, so that when you come across an outlet of a fast food chain like Domino's Pizza outlet, it might just be a franchise of the company being run under the Domino's Pizza company name and business model, but through another entity who has secured the rights to do so. So, how did this model that has worked for top food services companies become the doom of Mr. Biggs? You see, when Mr. Biggs created its initial outlets, the company's kitchen department set a very notable standard for themselves, a standard that potential competitors even feared to compete against. In fact, their signature item, the Mr. Biggs meat pie, was unmatched anywhere and soon became the most sought-after snack brand wherever a Mr. Biggs joint was located. But then, the franchise model came in and the USA began selling out the rights to use the trademark identities of their fast food chain, Mr. Biggs, without considering diligently the ability of the buyers of the franchise in maintaining the standards the popular fast food giant was known for. It was either the USA was not very much interested in setting measures that ensured that the buyers of the franchise, the franchisees, adhere to the business and quality standards of Mr. Biggs, or that the USA were not effectively ensuring that those measures were carried out. But one thing was sure, the Mr. Biggs brand was already set on the path of suicide as more and more less effective operators started buying up the franchise. While it helped fuel the initial growth of the company, it was only a matter of time, and the quality of the food and services of Mr. Biggs started declining on several fronts. The Mr. Biggs signature meat pie tasted no differently from the one in the next baker's shop, and there was no consistency in the standard of food preparation. Many of the franchisees prioritized profits over maintaining the brand standards. By this time, and around the 1990s, several fast food chains such as Sweet Sensation, Tasty Fried Chicken, and Tantalizers began popping all over the country, which meant that Mr. Biggs now had emerging competitors to deal with. In addition to the problems Mr. Biggs had to face, the late 1990s and early 2000s marked a time of economic instability for Nigeria. The fluctuating forex exchange rates affected the predictability of the cost of the imported ingredients essential for their Western-style menu, and the fast food giants suddenly became under pressure to guard their finances, which unfortunately resulted in tough decisions that affected the standards of their commodities. Quantities were cut, ingredients were substituted, or prices were raised. Soon, Mr. Biggs started losing its identity, the unique expectations that had been set for them, and the euphoric experiences that it offered. There were factors that had skyrocketed the brand to the top, and now these factors were missing. Not to talk about the emerging brands who were at the stage of creating impressions that would open the market to them. Soon, consumers of Nigeria started thinking, why not other brands? Before the UAC could realize that they have been comfortable in their position for too long, competitors were now giving them a difficult time, so that any improvements that were made were based on survival and not in overcoming other brands to retain their #1 position. That position was now contended, and the market was no longer in their fingertips as of before. Whatever last efforts to salvage what remained of the once reputable fast food chain proved abortive, and by the end of the first decade of the 21st century, Mr. Bigg's market share of the quick food service industry market began to decline rapidly. During a 2010 annual report by the company, decrease in sales were blamed on the economic woes and insecurity that ravaged the country as the UAC totally deferred responsibility. However, at around 2011, the restaurant company could boast of a 45% market share, which was still huge. In 2013, the South African company Famous Foods made a huge chess move by securing a 49% stake in Mr. Bigg's for an undisclosed amount. While things weren't as already bad as it is for Mr. Bigg's post-2020 era, the fast food joint still had the resounding name, and Famous Food was investing in that name. In that same year, UAC Restaurants Limited, a joint venture with Famous Food, realized a total of 292 million naira in profits before tax, which later fell by 63% the following year, resulting in profits of 108 million naira before tax in 2014. In 2017, the UAC restaurants still had about 131 functional restaurants in Nigeria, with most of them located in Lagos and Abuja. However, the business Mr. Bigg's enterprise continued to deteriorate, and in 2019, more than 41 outlets had to close down for reasons related to UAC's inability to keep them functioning in a profitable manner. At its highest point, Mr. Bigg's was estimated to have employed about 1,500 people and created over 14,000 indirect jobs. Most of their frontline staff consisted of undergraduates and fresh-off graduates from secondary school who could have easily moved on when their jobs were dissolved by the company's decline. However, the beneficiaries of the indirect jobs that emerged with Mr. Bigg's were the most affected, inasmuch as they could have been integrated into other fast food chains. It doesn't change the fact that a giant was falling and ripples were being created. Nevertheless, there are still functional Mr. Bigg's outlets in Lagos State, Abuja, Ogun State, and various other locations, which you can find in their website. Although the franchise is trying to keep its head afloat among trending brands like Chicken Republic, Kilimanjaro, Sweet Sensations, Crunches, and many others, the echoes of its name only reminds a consumer of the fall of a giant.
Mr. Biggs, Mr. Biggs.
Mr. Bigg's meat pie!
Even while Mr. Bigg's may be licking its wounds today, it is no doubt an example of a successful business that lasted decades throughout its prime. A feat not many Nigerian fast food chain can boast of.
Mr. Biggs has always been a major part of my story. It was at Mr. Biggs I first met their father.
Yeah, no disrespect to their meat pie, by the way, which was legendary back then, but Mr. Biggs was popularly used as a landmark bus stop. Whenever you are going, that Mr. Biggs, when you get to that Mr. Biggs junction, or wait for me inside that Mr. Biggs, I'll come and pick you.
The rise and fall of Mr. Bigg's presents so many lessons for entrepreneurs and business minds who have admired the brainwork behind the magnanimous brand, while also intrigued by the chains of events that triggered its downfall.